The wind howled like a beast. Snow slapped against the cabin walls, rattling loose boards. Inside, a small fire struggled to live. Widow Martha Clark bent low, feeding one last stick of wood into the flames. Her hands were cracked, skin raw from cold. The room was dim, shadows stretching across worn planks. Martha pulled her shawl tight. She listened to the storm. Every gust sounded like a voice calling through the night. She tried not to hear it. She tried not to remember how quiet the house had been since her husband died. The door slammed open. The wind screamed inside, scattering ash and sparks. Martha jerked up, heart hammering. A figure stumbled across the threshold, small, thin. Then it collapsed at her feet. Martha froze. For a moment she thought it was a ghost, something torn from the blizzard itself. But it was flesh. A girl, skin pale with frostbite, lips blue. Her breath came in shallow gasps. Around her neck, bright against the rags of a torn blanket, hung a beaded necklace. The colors gleamed even in the dark firelight. Martha's first instinct was to drag the body back outside. Trouble always came with strangers, and this was worse than most. She knew those beads. They were native. She pressed her lips tight, fighting. The urge to shove the girl into the snow. The fire cracked. The storm roared. And Martha remembered another winter. Her own child's fever, her husband's frantic prayers, the silence that followed. She could not send this one back into the storm. Not tonight. She knelt beside the girl. The skin was icy. Martha reached for a blanket and wrapped it tight. "Stay with me," she muttered, not sure if the girl could hear. The necklace slipped free. Martha touched the beads, smooth, cold. She knew they meant family, bloodlines, promises. She almost dropped them, as if they burned. Proof of who this girl was. Proof of danger. The girl stirred. Her eyelids fluttered. A weak voice broke through the storm. "They're coming." Martha stiffened. Her eyes darted to the door, still open, wind blasting in. She dragged it shut, bolting it fast. Her breath came hard, clouds of mist in the cold air. "Who?" she whispered, though she feared the answer. The girl tried to sit, but her body gave way. She slumped against the wall, whispering again. "Men." Martha's pulse pounded. She pressed her back against the door, straining to hear. Only the storm, only the roar of wind. But then, a scrape, a crunch of boots on snow. She moved to the window. Frost blurred the glass, but she saw them. Shadows moving slow, circling. Figures half lost in white. Her fingers brushed the beads. Again, a token, a curse. Proof that this girl carried enemies behind her. The fire snapped. The cabin walls shook. Martha's hand hovered near the rifle above the hearth, though she had not fired it since her husband's death. The storm masked their shapes. But the truth was clear. The girl's warning had not been a dream. Men were out there, watching, waiting. And in the dim cabin, Martha Clark's world narrowed to a single choice: protect the stranger, or open the door to fate. Outside, the shadows moved closer to the window. The storm still clawed at the cabin walls. Inside, the fire barely held. Widow Martha Clark poured a thin broth into a tin cup. Her hands shook as she carried it across the room. The girl stirred where she lay bundled in blankets. Eyes half open now, wary but alive. Martha crouched and set the cup near her lips. "Drink," she said. Her voice was flat, but her eyes never left the necklace that gleamed against the girl's chest. Steam rose. The girl sipped slow, clutching the beads with trembling fingers. Her voice cracked. "Ayoka." Martha blinked. A name. The storm seemed to pause with it. Still, her hand drifted upward to the rifle above the hearth. The old gun had belonged to her husband. Its wood was scarred, its barrel worn, but it was still ready. Proof of the man who once protected this house. Proof of what Martha might be. Forced to do, she kept her distance. The cabin felt divided, line drawn by firelight. Martha on one side, Ayoka on the other. Two worlds pressed together by snow and fear. The narrator's voice sharpened. "Would you trust her, or send her back to the storm?" Ayoka pulled the blanket tighter. She whispered between coughs. "Not my people. Not safe." Martha's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" The girl's gaze darted to the door. "Prisoners. I escaped. Not kin. Enemies." The words cut deeper than the cold. Martha's heart thudded. Enemies, that meant raiders. That meant the men outside might not even be hers. They might be hunting her too. She gripped the edge of the table, steadying herself. The necklace swung as a yoker shifted, its beads catching. Firelight. Martha thought of how such tokens marked bloodlines. She thought of how tokens also marked death. Silence filled the cabin, only the pop of fire and the roar of wind. Martha turned her head, drawn to the frost glass window. Something tugged at her gut. She rose, moved slow. Her breath fogged the pain. She brushed frost away with her palm. In the fresh snow outside, shapes broke the smooth surface. Clear, heavy, recent boot prints. Not one set, several. The storm had not covered them. That meant they were close. That meant they were here. Martha's chest tightened. Her hand crept once more toward the rifle. Inside the cabin, two strangers sat by firelight. Outside, boots marked the snow. The storm had not eased. Wind rattled every shutter. Martha Clark pressed Ahyoka's small hand, guiding her toward the trapdoor beneath the rug. The girl's eyes were wide, lips trembling. Martha pointed down. No words were needed. The girl obeyed, slipping into the dark cellar. The wooden lid closed, the rug slid back. Silence returned. Almost. Boots pounded the porch. A fist struck the door. "Open up!" The voice was rough, demanding. Martha gripped the rifle but held her ground. The pounding grew louder. A second man shouted, "We're freezing out here! Woman!" The latch lifted. The door flew wide. Snow and smoke of breath spilled in with three men. They smelled of horse and hunger. Their coats were torn, their faces sharp with cold and greed. The leader stepped first, his eyes cut like a knife. His name carried through the storm as if it had weight. Silas Ward. Once a rancher, now an outlaw. Men followed him because fear walked with him. He smiled thin. "Evening. We need warmth. We need fire." His boots scraped as he walked straight. To the hearth. Martha's jaw tightened. "You're not welcome," one of the men snorted, shaking snow from his hat. "We're not asking." The rifle on the wall caught their eyes. Silas's gaze lingered. He tilted his head, lips curling. "That old thing yours?" Martha lifted her chin. "My husband's." He stepped closer, studying her face. "You look like you'd use it." His hand brushed the mantle, daring her. The narrator's voice cut sharp. "Would you reach for the trigger, knowing 3 guns stood before you?" Silas turned, pulling off his gloves. From his coat, something slipped and fell to the floor. A small photograph weathered by years. Martha's eyes dropped. A young girl stared back from the faded paper. Dark braids, solemn eyes, and around her neck, the same kind of beaded necklace that Ahyoka wore. Martha's breath caught. She looked up fast, but Silas was already stooping. His fingers pinched the photo, slow and careful, as if the world had frozen. He noticed her eyes. His face hardened. "You saw." The room seemed to shrink. His men shuffled, glancing between them. Silas tucked the photo back into his coat, his voice low and final. "She's out there. I know it." Martha said nothing. Her heart thundered. Not just for herself, but for the girl below her floor. She pressed her palms against her skirt to keep them from trembling. Silas stepped closer to the fire. "I'll find her," he whispered. Then louder, his voice filling the cabin, "I'll have her." The flames hissed, the storm roared, and Martha's eyes flicked toward the trapdoor beneath her feet. Above the hearth, the rifle waited. In Silas Ward's coat, the photo waited too, and in the snow outside, the storm carried secrets toward the cabin door. The cabin above was restless. Boots scraped. Men muttered. Widow Martha Clark waited until their voices dulled, then slid the rug aside. She lifted the trapdoor just enough to slip through. A rush of cold air carried the smell of earth and dust. She climbed down the narrow ladder, holding a small plate of bread and broth. Her hands shook, not from cold but from fear of being heard. Ahyoka sat curled against the wall, eyes wide in the dark. The girl's face lit faintly when Martha held out the food. "Eat," Martha whispered. The girl took the bread with both hands, bowing her head in thanks. Silence hung, then she lifted the necklace from her chest, letting the beads catch dim light. "From my mother," she said softly. Martha's throat tightened. The beads were not just decoration. They were heritage, proof of family and history. She reached without thinking, touching the string. Memories surged, her own daughter's tiny fingers once clutching a ribbon before fever took her away. 2 mothers, 2 daughters, loss carved into both. The narrator pressed. "If you had lost a child, would you risk everything to save another?" Martha leaned closer. "She gave you this." Ayoka nodded. Her voice cracked. "Before fire, before blood." Martha froze. "What fire?" The girl's eyes darkened. She looked away, whispering words like shards of glass. "Silas, his men. They killed my village." The cellar seemed smaller, the air heavier. Martha's stomach turned. The man above, warming himself at her fire, had burned a home to the ground. He had destroyed this girl's world. Martha sat back against the dirt wall, staring into the shadows. The rifle upstairs had once defended her family. Now it guarded a murderer, above. Them floorboards groaned. A man's laugh echoed. Then Silas's voice cut sharp. "She's hiding something." Ayoka's breath quickened. Martha grabbed her hand, squeezing hard. The sound of heavy boots scraped across the cabin floor. Then came the crash. Wood split. A board ripped free. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Splinters fell onto Martha's shawl. Silas Ward was tearing into the floor. The fire had burned low. Shadows danced across the cabin walls. Martha Clark sat stiff, her ear tuned to every creak above the cellar. Silas Ward and his men had gone quiet, too quiet. Then it came, the slow groan of a board being shifted. A face appeared through the crack of the cellar door. One outlaw leaned down, eyes gleaming as they locked on Ayoka. "Found her," he hissed. Martha's heart lurched. She ripped the rifle from the wall, cocked it, and fired. The blast shook the cabin. The outlaw tumbled back, knife clattering from his hand, blood staining the snow that blew in through the open door. But the shot shattered the silence. Chaos erupted. Silas lunged, his boots pounding across the planks. In one swift motion he yanked the cellar door open and dragged Ayoka out by the arm. The girl screamed, kicking, but his grip was iron. Martha raised the rifle again. Silas swung the girl in front of him like a shield. "Don't!" he snarled. His other man stepped forward, knife drawn. Martha swung the rifle like a club, striking hard. The blade cut across her sleeve, tearing cloth, but she forced him back with a blow to the jaw. The fight raged in firelight, desperate and raw. Then it ended. Silas jammed his pistol against Ayoka's temple. "Enough!" Martha froze. Her breath came hard. Her arms trembled, the rifle heavy in her hands. "Drop it," Silas ordered. She let it fall. The sound of wood hitting wood was final. "Now," he said, tossing a coil of rope at her feet. "Tie her hands, do it, or I'll end her." Martha's fingers shook as she bound Ayoka's wrists. Tears stung her eyes, but she pulled the knots tight. The narrator's voice cut cold. "Would you tie the child yourself to keep her breathing one more night?" Silas leaned close to Martha, his voice low and venomous. "You think this is about revenge? No, she's worth more alive than dead. Gold for her safe return. Enough to start over." He grinned wide, showing teeth. "But if her people don't pay, then she burns." He reached for the hearth, pulling a torch from the flames. Fire licked the wood, glowing bright in the dark. He held it high, waving it near the dry beams of the ceiling, the cabin filled with heat and smoke. Firelight flashed across Martha's terrified face. Silas's grin widened as sparks drifted toward the rafters. The torch blazed in Silas Ward's grip, its fire snapping in the draft. Sparks drifted up to the rafters. Martha Clark's heart hammered. She could still feel the rope fibers that bound Ayoka's hands, still hear the child's sobs in her ears. "No," Martha whispered. Then louder, with steel in her voice, "You'll not trade her for gold." Silas cocked his head. "Then she dies." Martha lunged. She seized the torch with both hands. Fire scorched her palm as she wrestled it free. The blaze tumbled across the floor, striking dry straw near the wall. Flame spread quick, hungry. Silas roared, shoving her hard. Martha staggered back, but she swung her husband's rifle like a staff, striking him across the chest. He stumbled, snarling. The fight spilled. Outside into the storm. Snow lashed their faces. Silas slammed her against the doorframe. Martha drove her knee upward, forcing him off. They crashed into the drifts, rolling in the white fury, the torch's trail of fire caught inside. The cabin walls hissed, then roared. As flames climbed higher. Smoke pushed through broken shutters. Martha crawled through the snow, reaching for Ayoka. The girl was still bound, her voice sharp and terrified. "Run!" she screamed. "Run!" But Martha would not leave her. We cut the rope with the outlaw's fallen knife, freeing Ayoka's wrists. The girl clung to her arm, coughing, shaking. Silas pulled himself up, snow clinging to his coat. His lip bled, his breath ragged. He stared at Martha with something strange in his eyes. Not just rage, but recognition. "You fight harder than most men," he growled. Martha raised the rifle again, but her hands trembled. Smoke curled from the cabin behind her, flames reaching through the roof. The narrator's voice pressed in. "Would you choose to finish him, or drag the child into the storm and live?" For one tense breath, no one moved. Then Silas stepped back. He wiped blood from his mouth, smirked, and gave a sharp nod. "Stronger than most men," he muttered. He turned into the blizzard, vanishing into the white. Martha grabbed Ayoka's hand. Together, they staggered back from the fire. The cabin cracked, its beams splitting under the heat. A final groan echoed across the snowfield. Then the roof collapsed. The blaze poured upward, orange against endless white sky. Martha held Ayoka close, her face lit by firelight, her back whipped by storm. She watched her home fall into ash, knowing she had chosen mercy over safety, fight over silence. Behind them, the cabin's last wall shuddered and fell. The night burned itself out in flame and storm. What stood in its place was ruin. Martha Clark pulled Ayoka close beneath the broken shell of an overturned cart. The child shivered, her face streaked with soot and snow. Martha's shawl did little against the bitter cold, but it was all she had left to give. The storm eased as the hours crawled on. The wind softened, snow settled. The first thin light of dawn cracked the horizon. Martha lifted her eyes to it, her breath rising in faint clouds. A new day, but one without a home. Only ash and silence behind them. Ayoka shifted, whispering, hoarsely. "My people, they come." Martha turned. "Will they help us?" The girl shook her head, fear in her eyes. "They may not trust you." The words cut deep. Martha had chosen to fight for this child, but her reward might be a blade turned her way. The narrator's voice pressed, "Would you face judgment for a stranger, knowing it could mean death?" Across the white hills, shapes began to rise. At first, only dark smudges against the gold dawn. Then clearer, horses, riders, banners streaming with frost. They came in silence, hundreds strong, their lines stretching across the ridge like a wave. Martha's chest tightened. She pulled Ayoka tighter. She knew what armies did when they found one of their own in the hands of an outsider. She braced, herself for vengeance. The riders drew closer. Sunlight struck spears and bows. The sound of hooves broke the stillness. A wall of warriors moved down the slope, breath pluming in the cold. Martha rose to her knees, her body shielding the girl. She whispered, "Stay behind me." Ayoka's hand clung to her beads, the proof of who she was. The mass of riders halted in a single line. Frost churned beneath the horses' hooves. For one heavy breath, no one moved. Then, like a tide shifting, the front line of warriors bowed. One by one, heads lowered. Hundreds bent in the snow, silent, reverent. Martha's eyes widened. Her breath caught. This was not attack. This was honor. A single rider pushed forward. His horse stamped, steam rising. He raised his arm, finger pointed, not at Ayoka but at Martha. The storm was gone, dawn was full, but judgment had only begun. The line of riders parted. A single man rode forward, tall in the saddle, his face carved with years of battle and wisdom. His name moved through the warriors in low whispers, Chief Tyanita. He dismounted slow, his boots sinking deep in snow. His gaze swept the ruin before him. The blackened skeleton of the cabin, the rifle lying broken in ash, and the girl clutching her beads. He took in everything without a word. Martha Clark stood her ground, though her shawl was torn and her hands blistered from flame. She lifted her chin. She would not beg. Chief Tyanita stopped before her. His eyes lingered on the beads, then on the rifle. He spoke low, his voice steady. "You fought for her." Martha's throat tightened. "I did." The chief's eyes narrowed. "Against Silas Ward?" She nodded. "He would have traded her for gold. I would not allow it." For a long breath, silence reigned. Then Tyanita turned, his words carrying across the line of warriors. "This woman chose mercy when death was easier." One by one the warriors dismounted, knees bent, heads lowered. 475 figures bowed in snow, their silence heavy as thunder. The narrator's voice pressed, "What weight would you feel with hundreds bowing to your single choice?" Hyoka clung to Martha's side, her beads trembling in her grasp. Martha's eyes filled, but she held her stance firm. Chief Tyanita reached into his coat. From within, he drew a small carved token, wood shaped with care, painted with tribal marks. He pressed it into Martha's palm. His hand lingered warm against her cold skin. "Respect," he said. "You are owed it." Martha closed her hand around the token. The weight of it felt heavier than iron. Proof. Not of bloodline, but of honor earned. The warriors rose. Snow shifted beneath them. Tyanita's eyes lifted to the horizon, where storm clouds still twisted. His voice dropped, almost to a growl. "But Silas still walks." Martha felt the name like a shadow. The fire of her cabin was gone, but the fire of vengeance was not. The warriors mounted again, their line stretching wide across the dawn. Silence held. All eyes turned to Martha Clark. She stood in ash and snow, clutching the token in her hand. Behind her, the ruins smoldered. Ahead of her, the fight was not finished. The snowfield was still. Smoke curled from the ruins of the cabin, a black scar against the white dawn. Widow Martha Clark stood alone at the edge of the ash, her shawl torn, her hands blistered, her face lined with frost and firelight. In her palm rested the carved token Chief Tyanita had given her. The grooves pressed deep into her skin, a mark of honor she had not sought. She turned it over once, then closed her hand tight. At her side, Hyoka stepped close. The girl's beads swung in the cold wind, colors bright even against ruin. Her wrists, now free, bore red marks from the rope. But her eyes were steady, watching Martha as if she had found something more than shelter. The rifle lay broken in the snow, wood charred, barrel bent, a relic of another life, of a man long gone. The cabin itself was nothing but embers. Yet, in the silence, the fire seemed to burn still. Inside Martha, inside the child she had chosen to save, the narrator's voice carried the beads, the rifle, the fire, proofs of mercy, of loss, of strength. What would you have chosen, safety or sacrifice? Martha looked down at Hyoka. The girl leaned into her side as if a decision had already been made. Home was not a place of walls. It was a bond forged in storm and ash. "Stay," Hyoka whispered. Martha's throat tightened. She nodded once. The snow stretched endless around them, but the storm had broken. A new dawn painted the hills gold. Behind them lay ashes. Before them lay the weight of what came next. The narrator closed. Names fade, walls fall. But the fire of Martha Clark will not. It burns still, here in the snow. Martha Clark. The Zai. Camera of words turned to you, the listener. What choice would you have made? Mercy or vengeance? Comment your answer below.